Before there was Zeus, before the Titans, even before the earth herself took shape, there was night. Not the kind of night we know today, quiet, familiar, and softened by the glow of the moon. This was a deeper night, endless and formless, a black veil that covered everything. From that veil stepped a figure so ancient, so powerful, that even the Olympian gods whispered her name with caution. Her presence could calm or terrify, nurture or destroy. This goddess was Nyx. The Greeks believed that Nyx was more than just darkness. She was the origin of both comfort and dread, the one who wrapped mortals in sleep, but also the one who sent forth death, fate, and strife. From her shadowy womb came gods and spirits who touched every corner of human life: dreams, old age, deception, friendship, vengeance, and ultimately death. What made Nyx different from so many other primordial beings was not just her age or her children, but the weight of her authority. In a world ruled by Zeus and his thunderbolts, Nyx was one of the very few beings he would not dare to challenge. Her power wasn't measured in weapons or armies, but in inevitability. For every day must fall into night, and even the strongest god must one day yield to darkness. This is the story of Nyx, the primordial goddess and personification of the night. In the beginning, there was only chaos. Not chaos in the modern sense of disorder, but an empty void, a yawning gap from which everything else would emerge. Out of this void came the very first beings, not gods in the familiar Olympian sense, but primal forces that shaped the structure of the universe. From chaos was born Gaia, the earth, who would cradle all life to come. Tartarus, the pit, opened as a dark abyss beneath the world. Eros, the spark of desire, stirred the bonds of creation. And among these eternal presences was Nyx, night itself. Unlike Gaia, who had form and substance, Nyx was less a body than a presence. She was the endless curtain of darkness that stretched across the cosmos, the veil that settled over the world when light receded. The Greeks did not think of her as a goddess who simply ruled the night. She was the night. Nyx was older than the Titans and the Olympians. She belonged to the era of beginnings, when existence was still raw and undefined. To the ancient Greeks, night was not just the absence of daylight. It was its own force, heavy with mystery. For them, the silence of night carried both safety and fear. In its embrace, mortals found rest, but they also felt the lurking presence of death. This paradox, the dual nature of night as comfort and terror, was personified in Nyx. She did not need temples or altars to prove her divinity. Every sunset was her procession, every star her crown, and from her dark presence would come a lineage of forces that touched every corner of life and death. But before she bore her countless children, she stood as one of the eldest powers of creation, a being whose very existence reminded the Greeks that darkness was not an accident of the sun's setting. It was a divine, eternal presence that had been there from the very start. The ancient poets never gave Nyx a single fixed image. Unlike Olympians such as Athena or Aphrodite, whose likenesses adorned temples and statues across Greece, Nyx was too vast, too mysterious to be bound by marble or paint. She was described only in fragments, glimpses caught through the imagination of those who felt her presence when the sun had set. They envisioned her as a towering goddess robed in black, her mantle embroidered with stars and stretching endlessly across the heavens. Her face was hidden behind a veil, for to look directly upon night was to peer into something endless and unknowable. Some spoke of her as winged, her vast pinions spread across the sky, while others imagined her driving a shadowy chariot drawn by dark steeds, sweeping westward as Hemera the day retreated. Wherever she went, the world yielded. The brightness of Helios's chariot faded, the fires of men burned low, and silence fell across the earth. Her nature was both protective and dangerous, and in this, she mirrored the very experience of night itself. To farmers and travelers, night could be a blessing, coolness after the heat of day, rest after toil, the comfort of hypnos drifting over the body. Lovers and poets found shelter in her veil, unseen by prying eyes. Yet the same darkness that sheltered also hid thieves, wild beasts, and restless spirits. Mortals both longed for and feared the hours she ruled, and that duality was her nature, to comfort with one hand and terrify with the other. Nyx's powers reflected this same paradox. She was not a goddess of thunderbolts or seas, but of inevitabilities, forces that no mortal or god could resist. She did not fight, she did not bargain, she simply was. When night came, it was her arrival. When dreams carried mortals into strange realms, it was her children moving through their minds. When vengeance fell, when old age crept upon the body, when death came silently in the night, all of these can be traced back to her family. She was not just the backdrop of life, she was its hidden pulse. Homer and Hesiod both speak of her in reverent tones. Hesiod names her as one of the firstborn of chaos, a primordial presence alongside Gaia and Eros. Homer, centuries later, tells us that even Zeus, king of the Olympians, dared not confront her. That was her greatest power. Not the clash of weapons or the spectacle of storms, but the fact that no one could escape her. Every day ended in her embrace, and every life eventually passed into her shadow. To the Greeks, Nyx was a reminder that darkness is not the absence of light, but a presence in its own right, a presence that carried both shelter and peril. She was the cloak that protected, the veil that concealed, and the silence that reminded mortals of how small they were under her star-strewn robe. She was, above all else, inevitable. Among the earliest companions of Nyx was Erebus, her brother, and in many ways, her natural counterpart. If Nyx was the vast veil that swept across the heavens, Erebus was the very substance of that veil, the thick, suffocating darkness that filled the hollows of the world. To the Greeks, he was not a figure of chaos or violence, but of obscurity and silence. Erebus was the shadow that lurked in the corners of caves, the blackness of the underworld, and the unseen depth that stretched beneath creation. He was the unseen made manifest, the inescapable counterpart to light. Together, night and darkness formed a union that was less a romance than an inevitability. Just as night cannot exist without shadow, and shadow cannot exist without the fading of light, so too were Nyx and Erebus bound. Their meeting was not a matter of passion, but of balance, and from that balance came children who embodied the cycle of existence itself. The first of these was ether, the brilliance of the upper air. Unlike the heavy breath mortals drew, ether was the pure, shining light of the heavens, the clarity that filled the spaces where gods themselves dwelled. To the Greeks, when they looked up into the bright expanse above the clouds, what they saw was ether, not simply light, but the very essence of brightness. He was the reminder that even from night and darkness, radiance could be born, that the world was not bound forever in shadow. Alongside him was Hemera, the goddess of day. She was not just daylight itself, but the unstoppable rhythm of renewal, the force that banished night each morning. Yet Hemera did not destroy her mother. Instead, she worked in harmony with her. The Greeks imagined them living in the same dwelling, passing one another like ships at dawn and dusk. When Hemera emerged, Nyx withdrew. When Nyx returned, Hemera stepped aside. They were two sides of the same doorway, never present at the same time, but bound in an eternal cycle that made life possible. This cycle revealed a deeper truth of Greek thought. That night and day were not enemies at war, but kin who sustained each other. Light was not imagined as conquering darkness, but as something born from it, destined to yield again. Every morning, Hemera carried the gift of activity, growth, and clarity. Every evening, Nyx returned with rest, reflection, and mystery. And above them, both lingered ether, the shining purity that gave form to the heavens. Through this myth, the Greeks explained one of the simplest yet most profound realities, the rhythm of time itself. Night and darkness gave birth to light and day, and in doing so, showed that even the brightest forces of existence owed their origin to shadow. The presence of Erebus, so often overlooked, made this balance complete. Without him, Nyx's veil would be empty. With him, it was full, heavy, and real. In their union, the Greeks saw not destruction, but harmony. It was not the story of one power defeating another, but of opposites bound together in eternal exchange. And in this, Nyx's significance only deepened. She was not only the ruler of the night sky, but the mother of light itself, proving that even radiance was born from darkness. Hey everyone, before we continue, I've got some exciting news. My weekly video is now live on my new channel, Index Unknown. That's where I dive into the hidden side of history, the secrets, the theories, the conspiracies, the things they don't want you to know. The latest upload tackles the moon landing hoax, the claim that Apollo 11 never actually touched down on the lunar surface, and that the footage was staged here on Earth. Was it Cold War theater, Hollywood magic, or proof of one of the biggest cover-ups in history? The link's below if you're interested. Check it out after this video. From her union with Erebus, Nyx gave birth to Ether and Hemera, the shining air and the radiant day. But when she bore children of her own, her womb brought forth powers that reached into every corner of existence. These were not Olympian gods with temples and statues, but daemons, spirits that embodied the unseen truths of life itself. Collectively, they were known simply as the Children of Night, and they shaped the world in ways that no mortal could resist. The most familiar among them were the twins Hypnos and Thanatos. Hypnos was the spirit of sleep, drifting silently across the world each night. He was not harsh, nor did he command with force. He worked gently, folding the eyelids of men and gods alike, drawing them into dreams. Beside him stood his brother Thanatos, death itself, who arrived with the same stillness. In Greek thought, death was not always violent or cruel. Thanatos was a quiet guide, a reminder that the end of life could come as softly as the descent of night. Together, these twins revealed the double edge of Nyx's power, the comfort of rest and the inevitability of mortality. Close behind came the Oneiroi, her children of dreams. They poured out of her cavernous dwelling each night, swarming into the minds of mortals as visions. Some brought joy, carrying images of love and reunion. Others brought terror, filling sleep with dread. In later tales, one of them was singled out and given a name: Morpheus, the dream shaper, who could take any form and mold it into the visions of men. Through the Oneiroi, Nyx reminded the Greeks that the world of sleep was never empty. It was another realm, a place where mortals might glimpse truths, warnings, or illusions spun by night herself. Not all of her children carried comfort. Nemesis, the goddess of retribution, emerged from Nyx's shadow to balance arrogance and injustice. To the Greeks, Nemesis was not merely punishment, but a correction, the hand that restored order when men or even gods went too far. From the same womb came Eris, the goddess of strife. She was not the violent clash of armies, but the subtle seed of discord that, once planted, could unravel friendships, cities, and nations. Her presence explained the quarrels that divided families and the rivalries that led men into war. Among Nyx's most powerful children were the Moirai, the Fates. These three sisters governed the very thread of existence. Clotho spun the thread, Lachesis measured it, and Atropos cut it. Mortals had no hope of defying them, and even the Olympians could not escape their decree. When the Greeks spoke of destiny, they were speaking of Nyx's daughters, who embodied the truth that life itself was woven and ended in darkness. Her brood did not end there. Geras, the spirit of old age, was also born of night, reminding all creatures that time spares no one. Apate, the daemon of deceit, crept into the hearts of mortals with lies, while Dolos, the trickster, whispered cunning schemes. Moros represented doom, the bleak fate that hovered over all lives, and Oises carried sorrow and misery into the world. Yet even in this storm of shadow, Nyx bore Philotes, the spirit of affection and friendship. In her, mortals saw the other face of night, a place of intimacy, trust, and closeness. The list could go on. Hesiod and later poets named dozens more, each one an aspect of life that mortals could not master. And that was the essence of Nyx's brood. They were not gods one prayed to for blessings, but forces one endured, feared, or acknowledged. They made visible the parts of existence that lay beyond human control: sleep, death, fate, vengeance, old age, deceit, strife. Through her children, Nyx was everywhere, woven into every dream, every quarrel, every loss, and every quiet night of rest. For the Greeks, this immense family showed the reach of night. She was not just the dark sky above their heads. She was the mother of inevitabilities, the hidden forces that governed the mind, the body, and the soul. By the time the Olympians had seized their thrones, most of the primordial deities had receded into the background of myth. They were remembered as ancestors, forces that set the stage, but few still held sway in the age of Zeus. Nyx, however, was different. She did not vanish into the shadows she embodied. She remained present, woven into the order of the world, and there was no clearer proof of her power than the single moment in Homer's Iliad when Zeus himself bowed to her authority. The story begins with Hera, the queen of the gods, who longed to turn the tide of the Trojan War. The Greeks and the Trojans clashed on the battlefield, and Hera, ever opposed to Zeus's will, hatched a plan to distract her husband long enough for her allies to gain the upper hand. To do this, she needed Hypnos, the god of sleep, and one of Nyx's many sons. Hypnos was not eager to help. He remembered a time long ago when Hera had convinced him to lull Zeus into slumber. It had worked, but when Zeus awoke and realized he had been tricked, his rage was like a storm shaking the very heavens. Hypnos fled in terror, darting across the world until at last he reached the safest refuge he knew, the arms of his mother, Nyx. And here lies the turning point. Zeus, furious and ready to unleash his vengeance, followed after him. But when he saw Hypnos protected by Nyx, he stopped. The Thunderer, who had hurled his father Cronus into the pit of Tartarus, who had crushed the giants and bent the will of countless gods, did not dare to lay a hand on her. Homer writes that Zeus respected and feared Nyx too much to risk her anger. In that moment, the king of the Olympians was checked, not by force, but by the silent authority of night. When Hera approached Hypnos again during the Trojan War, he hesitated, reminding her of this past encounter. But her persuasion was relentless, and in the end, he agreed. Once more, Hypnos lulled Zeus into deep slumber, and once more he knew that if wrath descended upon him, his mother's shadow would shelter him. Nyx did not appear directly in the story, but her presence loomed all the same, a reminder that her protection was enough to disarm even the mightiest of gods. This episode is brief, almost easy to overlook in the sweeping epic of the Iliad, but it carries immense weight. It is the only time we see Zeus's power halted not by battle, not by cunning, but by respect. To the Greeks, this meant something profound, that Nyx was more than just a figure in old genealogies. She was a living force whose dominion lay beyond Olympus. Zeus might command the sky and thunder, but he could not command night. The story also revealed a truth about her children. Though they were daemons, spirits of the unseen, their mother's authority gave them protection greater than armies. Hypnos could act boldly, knowing that behind him stood a presence older and greater than Zeus himself. In the hierarchy of Greek myth, that made Nyx unique. She was not an Olympian, nor a Titan, but a being who commanded reverence simply because she was inevitable. This myth reinforced the idea that even the king of the gods was subject to night. No one, mortal or divine, could escape her coming. In the quiet of the evening sky, when the sun had set and the stars pierced through the veil, the Greeks would have known what Homer's tale made clear. When darkness fell, even Zeus lowered his gaze. Unlike the Olympians, Nyx never had grand temples rising in her honor. No marble sanctuaries bore her image, no great festivals celebrated her with sacrifices and songs. She was too old, too vast, and too omnipresent for worship in the traditional sense. After all, why build a temple to night when every sunset already transformed the entire world into her shrine? Yet Nyx was not absent from Greek religion. She lingered on the edges of cult and ritual, most strongly in the Orphic traditions. The Orphics, with their fascination for the hidden and the eternal, spoke of her as a prophetic power. In some hymns, Nyx was said to dwell within a black, starry cave where she whispered truths of the cosmos. It was from this sacred dwelling that she offered counsel even to the gods. In certain Orphic texts, Uranus and Cronus, the great sky father and the devouring Titan, were said to receive wisdom from Nyx, as though even they needed the guidance of night. The Orphic hymns themselves, written in her honor, describe her as all-seeing and all-mother, a goddess who holds the key to both creation and destruction. They call on her not only as the bringer of sleep and dreams, but also as the force who rules over destiny and the underworld. Unlike the Olympians, who were praised for blessings or feared for their tempers, Nyx was invoked as a kind of eternal presence, one whose influence was already woven into every moment of human life. In daily practice, Greeks acknowledged her less directly. Night itself was sacred, a time for offerings poured quietly into the dark, when mortals whispered prayers to unseen powers. The ancients recognized the dangers of the dark, thieves, spirits, restless shades, but also its necessity. Farmers relied on the night's coolness, travelers feared its shadows, poets found inspiration in its silence. To all of them, Nyx was there, not as a distant figure, but as the very presence around them. So while she never claimed temples of stone or golden statues, Nyx did not need them. She was not a goddess who lived in one place. She was everywhere the night fell, a deity whose worship was less a matter of ceremony and more a matter of acceptance. The acknowledgement that darkness was eternal and that it shaped life as surely as light. Because Nyx rarely appears in the great epics, it is easy to mistake her for a minor figure in Greek mythology. Unlike Zeus, who thundered across every tale, or Athena, who guided heroes with wisdom and strategy, Nyx kept to the shadows. To some, that absence suggests insignificance, a goddess forgotten in the background. But this is one of the greatest misconceptions about her. Nyx did not need long stories or temples filled with statues. Her authority was assumed, her power was acknowledged without question. Another common misunderstanding is to cast her as a figure of malice. Later cultures, especially as darkness itself came to be associated with evil, sometimes reimagined Nyx as sinister or monstrous. Yet in the original Greek vision, she was neither good nor evil. She was balance. She gave rest through hypnos, but also brought death through thanatos. She sent forth dreams, but also strife and retribution. Night was both a comfort and a danger, and so too was she. To reduce Nyx to a villain is to miss the point. She was inevitability, not malice. Even within ancient traditions, her role could be seen differently. In the mainstream myths, Nyx remained on the edges, respected, feared, but not central. By contrast, the Orphic traditions elevated her to a cosmic mother, the source of creation and prophecy. That divergence itself shows her versatility as a symbol. Her legacy did not fade with Greece. In Rome, she was worshipped as Nox, still veiled, still cloaked in constellations. Later writers and artists continued to draw on her image, casting her as mystery incarnate. In modern times, she is reborn again and again, in fantasy, literature, and art. Sometimes as the dark goddess of danger, sometimes as the eternal mother of night. What remains constant is the sense that she cannot be escaped. Every evening when the sun dips below the horizon, Nyx returns. Whether mortals feared her or found comfort in her, her presence was inescapable. That was her true legacy, not in stories of conquest or defeat, but in the certainty of her continued existence. She was, and still is, the eternal night, a reminder that no matter how bright the day, darkness is inevitable.